time I've been to any sort of Angular conference or developer conference and had the chance to speak. Yeah, you guys are lovely. I've spoken my field a little bit, but marketers are kind of turds, so it's a little different. But it brings me to my first confession, which is I'm not a developer. I don't build cool things at all, but I do know that the best place to be is in a room where you're surrounded by people smarter than you, so really glad to be here. What I do, though, is I try to make the cool things that you build and the content that other people put together and make sure that that is parsed and indexed and can be found. So it's not all that bad. But I do have to apologize because normally I don't tell people what I do because SEO is a bit of a four-letter word. I understand we're the worst. I've talked to a few people here and they were like, oh, black magic, snake oil. I think I called them turds earlier. It's totally fair. But we're pretty awful in a lot of ways, and we've had a pretty negative history. We're not always the worst, though. There are some redeeming qualities, and we are maturing as a group, so bear with us. But I think one of the most obnoxious and most irritating things about our industry is that the people who are really good at it, they can't give you really clear answers. Mostly we say it depends. This isn't always our fault. It is sometimes because maybe we don't know. But the way that Google has built their algorithms is that they don't have one algorithm. They have hundreds. Some get updated every day, every hour. Some get updated not for years. They have shards of those. They run tests constantly. They personalize it whether you're signed in or not. They do different things based off of different countries or languages. They don't tell us what's going on, and so we're left in this world where we're not really sure. Google's constantly changing. They do have guides. Their guides are super useful. They say stuff like, be great and earn trust, which is something at 35 I still haven't learned in real life, so thank you, Google. But it is tough, and we do say it depends a lot. And honestly, the better SEOs that you meet, hopefully they should be saying it depends because we don't know. I worked for a company that is able to get billions of URLs and data, and even if we can come to a pretty good correlation, it's just that. It's statistically insignificant, and because it's dynamic, I can't reproduce those results most of the time, which I feel like there's like 7 people in here that are ready to throw a shoe, because if you're scientifically minded, that's what you want to be able to do. I can't do that in my job. I do want to, it's glitchy all over. I do want to step back, though, and say that there are different types of SEOs. So offsite, people who market stuff, they build links. They're my least favorite. Don't tell them. They're also the meanest. On-site, so people who are writing really good content and have a great interface and getting people engaged when they're on the site. And then there are, you know what's supposed to be in that circle? Me. I'm supposed to be in that circle. The technical ones. So I'm biased, but if you're interested at all in SEO, but you find the community to be a bit not your style, make friends with someone who's a technical SEO, because they're the bridge between the folks that are going to do the marketing and write the content and do stuff versus the folks who are technical are really just there just to make sure that what you build can be parsed and indexed. A little bit of that saving grace I mentioned before. So by nature, SEOs have to be aware of accessibility. Googlebot's been called the blind 5-year-old, which I think is pretty forgiving. I usually add inebriated to that. So when we first started testing crawling, that's like what the bot did. It stumbled around from link to link and barely understood what was going on. You had to spoon feed it. Google's grown up a little bit. It's more like a recreational drug user, stubborn 12-year-old now. So we get along really well. But a lot of SEOs, because they grew up having to understand that accessibility, are doing more in terms of making it accessible, not just for people who are using view screens or people who have hearing impairment, but for lots of other folks too. So again, we're trying to redeem ourselves a bit. I'm going to leave some of these stats up here. I had to do some quick math offline because I have a degree in art history, but my favorite point is that 46% of adults with a disability in the US do not regularly go online. The experience is so awful for them that they have cut themselves off from the information, from the networking, from the companionship and opportunities and entertainment that the internet affords the rest of us, and that's devastating. So it's something that's become really important to me and something that's becoming important to a lot of other folks in the SEO field as well. Here with Basil coming up, that Angular will have even faster ways to be more accessible, so I'm really looking forward to that. All right, we're done with the mushy stuff. Just kidding, there's way more of it. Things are getting more technical. So W3 just launched something or just posted something like a week ago. 95% of websites now use JavaScript. I don't think all of them need it, but they're all using it. And the thing with JavaScript is it can get a little heavy. In my job, we've basically been given an ultimatum by Google to specialize or get out. So it's the suck it up, buttercup. Better learn some SEO, or some JavaScript, better learn Angular. So I said I would roll up my sleeves and do that. I did it. I did it. Somebody tweet John Mueller. Tell him I'm good. But because speed is so important to us, and understanding those scripts and how they affect load time. I'm going to talk a little bit about size matters. I mentioned earlier that I'd hang out with an inebriated 12-year-old bot. So Leisure Suit Larry, the old PC game, 1.1 meg for that whole game. You weren't playing it, right? Nobody's going to admit to this. Lemmings, which was also a family favorite, 2.3. I see Doom a lot out there at 2.39 megs. And these games were transformative when they came out, like seared into my memory, so much fun. But nowadays, with 95% of sites using JavaScript, even with really fast, simple, clean sites, it gets weighty. So where's Zach? Is he gone? I'm poking fun a little bit, but even the ngATL site came in at 6.8 megabytes, and it loads pretty quick. And it doesn't have that many resources. I've seen sites that you can add a decimal point to that for resources, but it just shows how quickly that stuff adds up. Nicole, this one's for you because you're from Nintendo. The most arrogant I have ever been in my entire life is when I have 2 beers and challenge anyone to play me at Dr. Mario. It's my favorite game. But the old NES had just 2 kilobytes of RAM, and cartridges were only up to about 1 meg, which is kind of crazy to think about what they could do in those packages. So we've got this thing where we're in this place now where the JavaScript and all the different fun stuff that we can do with sites grew a little bit faster than everything else, and so we need a bigger boat. And I know not all JavaScript is created equal, and as a mother of 2, I can tell you with confidence that it's okay to pick a favorite kid. SEOs love Angular Universal. You solve a lot of these problems already, but I'm going to bring in some of those common core scripting issues just because it's good to be aware of them. Don't tell my kid which one I like best. Rendering's the most important thing for the most part. This graph is from 2017, late 2017, so I haven't updated it. But what this shows is if content that was only rendered client-side was indexed by these different search engines. So Google is trying really hard, like they're doing pretty good, not perfect. I really like to see all that green up there. I don't know what Ask is doing, like what is going on over there? They're doing great as far as rendering goes, so Professor Jeeves is up to something. So Google tries really hard, they have the bulk of traffic, but they're pretty good at admitting that they're not where they want to be. So what they want to be able to do is to go crawl sites and to be able to take the HTML that you're normally serving the DOM, but also rendering everything on the client side and extracting anything of value there, take them both together, pull out the content, index that, grab the links, and go back and crawl. That's their ideal world. That's not what they're doing today. So right now what they're doing today is they're extracting the content from the DOM. Anything you have in HTML, they'll pull it, they'll crawl the links, they'll index the content. And if you have something that requires client-side rendering, they'll come back when they're not busy, is literally what they say. So it could take them up to a week is the estimate to come back to your site with a different version of the crawler and grab that content and render it and extract value from it. So even if your pages are getting picked up quickly, any content that you're relying on client-side may not. It may not be picked up at all, but even if it's structured properly, it's going to take longer. So if you have any real critical content, don't put in a script. Make sure it's rendered before it leaves the server. Here's a really adorable example. Pokedex.org is one of the, I think it's one of the Angular 1 showcase site of look at all the cute things we could do. It's actually a pretty cool site. So 650 Poke listed. You can go through and see stats for all of them, battle details. I think altogether they would have literally thousands of pages if they built them all out for content. It makes me really happy. Google has indexed 1 page, just the home page of this site, and someone worked really hard on the content. So you guys can do the whimpering in the Ryan Reynolds voice, which is slightly creepy, but we're going to go with it. Is anybody not okay with him voicing Pikachu? I don't know yet, jury's out. But why? Why is nothing coming through? So server-side rendering, fully parsed. When you get to client-side rendering, it's like, you do the work over there. Like, I don't really want to be responsible for it, which works sometimes. But this site in particular also had actions that were required, so I had to click on a Pokemon to see it expanded. I had to click on the stats to see more data and more content from there out. And bots aren't people. They follow links, they don't click. So it's one of those things where you can build something really dang awesome and really useful and really, like, it's just great, it's just cute. Like, I want to have an index because it feels like a great resource out there, but they're not going to index it just because. So testing and troubleshooting is really important. So Google's limits. Here's the thing about Google. This drives me a little bit bananas, but rendering is really, really important, and they talk to us a lot about it. Make sure your page renders well. Their web rendering service is running off Chrome 41 right now, which was released in 2015, and we're on Chrome 72 stable right now, so it's pretty far behind. So if you want to see how Google's seeing your site, you could go and download Chrome 41, but I probably wouldn't because security is a thing, capital T thing. So don't do that. We have a few other workarounds, but they're struggling to get their web rendering service that goes and grabs and renders your scripts and then parses that information to be up to date. Their goal, and they said they would release it soon, is to get their WRS up to date with like the latest stable version of Chrome. So it would hop up 30 versions immediately. I haven't seen it yet. It's like one of those, we promise. Maybe you can get a kitten next Christmas. The few other tools though, so Google has a mobile-friendly testing tool. Even if you don't give 2 cents about mobile, it's really cool because it'll render the page immediately, but it also has a spot where it'll log any blocked resources, and there's a JavaScript log in there too, so you can see how those resources are being hit and if there's any errors. So after you click up to the pretty marketing part, there's like a view more information, and that's the good stuff. Google has a URL inspection tool in Google's Search Console, which does require credentials. Does anyone here use Search Console? Oh man, that's 3 of us. We're gonna be friends. There's some fun things in there. There are some shortcomings, but this tool is pretty cool because what it does is it goes and it takes that snapshot in time, but then it overlays it with indexing data. So instead of just being a static screen of what you see, it's actually saying, but this is what we've processed, and this is what we've seen, and this is where we have conflicts. So if someone on your team does have access to go into it, it's a page by page. It's not in their API yet. I hope it will be. But it's a pretty cool way to see how they're rendering it, but again, how they've played that against what they've decided to keep in their index. And just a quick tip, because Google's a little sluggish with JavaScript, if you're going to push an update, tag a little version number on there after a hash, and Google will be like, oh, it's new. You could also just do it if you feel like it. They will just check it. So to get them to pick those resources up a little quicker. How you guys doing? You're supposed to answer so I can drink some water. I'm really nervous. Meta elements are a basic building block for SEO. Sometimes, though, with script-built sites, they don't pull into the head. Some are more important than others. If you can't get any, or if you can only get a few, the viewport, canonical tag, and title are really important. SEOs will harass you over this a little bit, but it's for good reason. So when we take a look at the site up in the head, you can see that the title and description are what gets pulled in the SERP. So titles count a lot for ranking. But more than that, it's one of the ways that we can control how the website looks in Google. And there's not a lot of ways that we can control how our site shows up. This is even just a suggestion. Google can overwrite that based on the queries. But it is one way that we have for telling users immediately what the site has to offer and try to get them to click. URLs are another really important part. So, too loud. Should I do this? Should I add a cute little hash to my URL to separate pages? Please don't. That's what Pokédex did, and they did not have a good life. Second one, parameter plus some sort of internally named category ID that means nothing to anybody, plus another parameter that I think is hilarious. Should I do that? No, please don't. And they're easy to build them like this, too. It takes a little extra work to do it the right way. But should I do this? Should I create actual directory structures and separate keywords? Yes, please. It is really taxing for devs to have to go back and change the architecture of the site. It's a lot of really tedious work that we would like to save you from. It's a pain. History.pushState will help you create those beautiful URLs and let you toggle back and forth. But good URLs need to be logical, they need to be readable. They should really mirror the architecture of your site so that they enable your site to grow with you without changes, but also regardless of where I am, I can move in the directory structure and get to a logical page. Header responses are, I think this is where a lot of SEO dev fights start. I like to take 3 feet back and watch. There's some pretty good battles, but 404s and 410s, so when the browser goes knocking on your server, if something's gone, you have to say it's gone. 404 is not found and a 410 is gone, but Google treats them roughly the same. Just make sure that if something's not a valid page, you return a 404 header. So if you don't, we get things like soft 404s, which is the header saying 200, okay, hey, I'm alive, no biggie, and everything else being like, oops, user, this doesn't exist, which happens a lot. So just making sure that the header matches the intention is really important. I put on here that there's some sneaky 404s and service worker intercepts. So I have some cool use cases where the service worker followed the path of the user and then URLs were only generated based on that. And then when they went back and shared those URLs, they broke. I'm not good at drawing diagrams that well, so you'll have to come talk to me afterward. But if you're interested, they can be tough to find and troubleshoot. The other area is redirects. I don't know, have you guys ever had anyone squawking about 301 redirects? They're really important to SEOs because we save traffic from them. People might have them bookmarked. People might have them shared somewhere. We don't want to lose any of those visits. Also, they pass value. So when other sites link to me a lot, or when people use those links, or when I'm found on specific resources, and Google and other search engines can go, all right, like you earned some trust, we're going to give you bonus points for ranking. We're going to show you higher. But every time you just delete a page instead of redirect, all of that gets thrown away. A redirect allows you to preserve some, if not all, of that value and transfer it back to the site. Don't use meta refresh redirects. Those are bad. Please don't use those. Those are really awful for bots, not just for Google, but for just about every bot. You will hear from SEOs that you should use a server-side 301 redirect. That's the best. JavaScript redirects are okay too, but try not to use a server-side 302. To a dev, those look the same. They do the same thing. To SEOs, they're different signals to the bots. So 301 says, hey, I found someone else I liked at that table over there, so I moved all my stuff. Please deliver my food over there. A 302 is, I'm going to go check it out, but I don't know if I'm going to stay there. I might come back, but I'm not sure. Just leave my food over here to get cold. So they have very specific messages to the bots, and even though it's just one digit and functionally they do the same thing, we have to make sure that they're right. Be careful doing anything with robots tags in the head. Most of the time they're not necessary. Everything is crawled and indexed by default unless you want to block something. But don't use JavaScript to add or remove them client-side. That can cause issues. On that note, your HTML and your rendered content should match. It doesn't have to, 100%. I'm going to say rebel a little, change it up. But the meta tags and the head element and the body content should be the same. Otherwise, you could get hit with a cloaking penalty. Internal links, this is just making sure that you know that links, Google still crawls by links only, that's how they get around. So you need to make sure that your content, he's cute, I know, me too. You need to make sure that they're on the page, and they're a ranking signal, they're a really strong one, because it's your site and you built it. So if you have an entire structure that points primarily to these 7 pages, Google is awesome. I know that those are important to you and I trust you. Doesn't mean it's the right thing for them to do to trust you, and they might learn that, but at the same time, getting those internal links really, really tight is really important. This is what a good link looks like versus a bad link, so you need to have that Ahref element in there. If you have to do on-click, which you shouldn't because Google can't execute these events, make sure that has the Ahref tag as well, so top and bottom are options, but the top option is really where you want to stick to if you can. Here's like icing on the cake part. Is anyone here doing anything with structured data right now? Whew, yeah, we're back to like one person. I love it. So there's this adage in marketing, which my husband did, and he's more qualified for my job than me, but he's a stay-at-home dad. Anyhow, it's the show me or tell me, but don't do both. Structured data is definitely tell me what you're going to tell me. If you can show me, that's cool too, but if you can give me a heads up what you're going to tell me before you tell me, that's great. So there are these simple little meta elements that basically say what you're saying, which sounds super redundant, but what this does is you no longer have to rely on the bot to crawl and go, pretty sure this is an event, pretty sure that's the start time. You can actually structure and say this is the exact start time, end time, this is where the event is, this is how much tickets cost. On that screen are just a few that Google supports that you might see in the SERPs. There are lots and lots of others if you go to schema.org, including some really obscure ones. It's super fun to go troll that. There are some cool ones in beta like the speakable attribute. So you can tell Google what parts of your content are appropriate to be spoken out loud, which is super useful for Google Actions or Google Home Assistant. Here's how a few of that looks in the SERP. So any of the pretty shiny stuff you see, gold stars, cost, if it's out of stock, some information on the knowledge panel, those are all coming from structured data elements or just sites that have those clearly labeled. These are all for Bob's Burgers. I'm a total Linda. But your structured data does need to be in your HTML. You can do it with RDFA or micro formats. You should use JSON-LD. It's a little more scalable. Google has a pretty cool structured data testing tool that's actually a sandbox too, so you can edit them and see if it validates in real time. The cool thing about structured data is that it's not really just about browsers. So we have already moved to a place where there are lots of different ways that people can ask for information and get it back where screens don't even exist yet. So we don't know how Google can and will take our content and expose it to people, but if we have structured data present, we're giving them more flexibility. Speed and cost, I talked about size matters a little bit there. I'll go through this kind of fast. I was really pumped to see some perf talks here, like that was very cool. That's something that we have to talk a lot about in our industry because literally a half a second can mean a big change in business for our clients. Adi Osmani is from Google, and he has a really incredible article specifically about JavaScript and the cost of JavaScript today. I tried to tease out some of the complexities, but there are just lots of ways that this kind of weight can affect people. So first off is data costs money. So here's an estimate of a 4 meg site and how much it costs to load that homepage in different countries. There's some cool methodology from the ITU and how they generated this data, but you can test your site too and see like how much does it really cost to load my page, and let's be sensitive to that. Conversion costs, so if your site's slow, less business, less success. There's a lot of like shocking numbers out there. I picked a couple, but essentially the slower you are, the less likely people are to convert, and the more likely they are to abandon your page. Money's business. I think we should all keep our jobs, so we gotta make it fast. This is a good graph that shows you on one side the availability of 4G, which is really spotty, but even then the people that are experiencing 4G speed is pretty low. We're getting there, we're not anywhere close yet, and really I think that building these lean applications are about making them really delightful and available for people all over to get your content. Just like everything else you should test. I did use a stock photo, shame on me. I always tell myself, like, don't use any stock photos of white dudes, but it happens. Couldn't help it this time. So don't trust controlled conditions, and this is my favorite is when I tell a dev, I'm like, hey, the site's kind of sluggish, and I work remotely, so I'll call him up and be like, the site's a little sluggish today, can you check it out? And without blinking, and him sitting next to like an overheated server room is like, works for me. I'm like, cool, definitely got my point across, fabulous. So take a walk. Take your phone, take a walk, go to different places in your town, pull up your website on your phone and try to do something. Try to execute your app where you don't have controlled data. There are lots of cool tools as well where you can control and throttle the data so you can see what it's like on different devices or on 3G or LTE, and I think that it's really important to suffer a little. I think you should know how bad it sucks for someone who doesn't have it pre-cached and isn't sitting right next to their servers. Use lots of tools. Jeff did a really cool demo on Lighthouse earlier and saved me that. Thank you, sir. I also included links to these tools from Tim Kadlec, and he does some really cool stuff with speed and performance and cost. His tools are hideous. Like, they look terrible, so I didn't put a screen in there, but the data's really good. He knows. Analytics, again, really, really important. How many times have I said really important? You guys get it? Good. I am a parent. Google Analytics was designed for multi-page applications. They weren't designed for single-page applications. They do have ways to do it now, but it's tricky. And Google Analytics is just one data set we're looking at, but I know that there are a lot of other platforms out there that may have trouble monitoring that. Data itself is really important. Ding, take a shot. Mostly it was just really important that I was able to make a slide that did a mashup between Wu-Tang and Star Trek. So, Google does support virtual page views. They have some cool documentations. There are lots of other ways to do it that I've read about but can't comprehend because it's above my head. You all are really, really smart. But there are lots of cool ways to track how people are interacting with your application. All right, so let's do this. Today, if you can, maybe tomorrow, you get a one-off today, but start testing your rendering. Look at your links and URLs, make sure they're clean. Make sure the core meta elements are coming through. If you can, check analytics to make sure you're getting credit for all the hits to those. If you're still up for it tomorrow, make things more accessible than they already are. Work on structured data or play with it, because it's pretty fun experiments and fine-tune speed. And make a friend. I am not naive, but I am just desperately optimistic, and I think that our two fields can do really good things if we work together, and not all SEOs are totally awful. We're like moderately awful, but I would love to help with that connection. So whether it's through Twitter, I'm on the Webmaster Help Forum as well. We have a product expert panel just like the Google Developer Experts, so I have been in that program for a decade, which is a long time. I can help you connect with other SEOs and companies. If you want to speak at SEO conferences, I can help put you in contact with people. I work for a really cool company called Deep Crawl. Happy to give you free crawls. I am not a salesperson, obviously, but they let me come here alone and bought all the wine and beer yesterday. So let me know if I can crawl your sites for free and send you all the data. Do you have 1 more minute? Can I do that? Okay, because I told you I'd get mushy again. This has been a really incredible few days for me. So the first thing that struck me is how much Zach has worked to get diversity here. It's a quick quote from Stephen Colbert when he realized that his writer room was just not diverse at all. He would be building a team and he'd get 150 resumes and he said 8 would be women. So then he'd ask, I want only resumes of women, like just send me 150 women, and he'd get like 80. So he said, we had to take an extraordinary step in order to get an extraordinary result. Even with all that effort, his writing room is still 50% white men. The rest is split between women and people of color. I know it takes a lot of work. The other thing that I kept thinking about here was there's Google's Project Aristotle, 10-year-long on how to make effective teams, and their #1 factor was psychological safety, which just means that people make it okay to fail, to try, to experiment, to take risks, and to just work together and have that sort of social sympathy and sensitivity at work. I was very nervous coming in. I already have a few friends who have given me thumbs up from the audience. I really felt like this was a safe place to get up and bomb and still get positive feedback. So I just want to say thank you for letting me sit with you. What an awesome community you have.
So what I've learned from Ashley's talk is that SEO is hard.
Yep.
Accessibility is important.
Yep.
And that her house is full of drunk 5-year-olds.
Yeah.
That's what I took away, mainly.
I thought that was the only thing at first I was taking away, but
6 and 8-year-olds,
yeah.
they're maturing. My daughters are great.
they'll keep you busy. And I mean, what else I liked about it was it kind of came back full circle. We've heard a lot about performance and why it's important. Yet another reason why performance is so important is like we're also getting SEO benefits from it, and that we always need to be thinking about the user, but now we're also thinking about the bot, the search bot, which is helping users find your application or site.
Yeah. It's all connected. SEO is not hard though. I guess that's the thing I should have called out. It's mostly like bullshit and basic logic. So if someone's like, there's like a lot of science, it's not. It's like, whatever.
I think the part that's hard about it, and you and I spoke about this at the speaker dinner the other night, was more that it's hard to get it perfect. Like it's hard to know exactly, like, if I do this, is it going to work? It's really hard. And you covered that in the talk.
Yeah, there's actually there's so many, I guess, just options for things to change under your feet that we don't have that. But at the end, and it sounds cheesy and a lot of people hate it, but Google's always just said, like, build a great site, like, do the right thing, here are a few basic tenets. That really is what works. Like, people who have been at it for 10 years and have tried lots of tricks and have gotten little tweaks here or did things bad and it worked for a short term, like, they've had to race around, but the people who just focused on a really great site and experience are still hanging tight up there.
Yeah, it's like follow the rules that we should be doing anyways. Like, accessibility is always one that stood out in it. I think it always, like, I think you covered that, but it ties in very much in SEO because it's doing semantic markup and building a site that works.
Google does really smart things, but the bots aren't that bright. I mean,
No?
I could hang with them. It's fine.
And it's funny you called out, I think in all of my years of development, SEO has always been like SEO.
I know. I don't even, you guys, I don't even tell people in my real life what I do for a living. I have great shame. Yeah, we have.
But you have like a deep technical approach to it, and you're very thoughtful versus, I think most people's interaction with SEO is like, oh, hire some company and they'll do some dark magic and like weird hacks that only they know.
Yeah.
And like we'll boost our search engine rankings. But you're like, build a good site, make it accessible, make it fast, make it performant, and like you'll naturally win. And it's so simple, but like I think the whole industry has convinced us that it's much harder than it is.
I mean, there's a lot of really honest, fantastic, charismatic used car salesmen too that get a bad rap. So I get it. I get it. But our community is maturing a bit. They're doing some really good things collaboratively, and I feel like the tide has turned a bit. So give us a chance. If you have questions or anything, like just bug me and I'll find the right person for you to make it not so awful. I really would love to see the communities come together a little more. I'd like to see more devs speak at SEO conferences, and I feel really lucky that I got invited to speak here because we're next door neighbors, at least the technical
It goes
SEO.
together. It definitely goes together.
I hate peanut butter and jelly, so don't say that. It's a sin, but yeah, I think we could work really well together.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. You gave a great talk, and thanks for joining us on stage, too.
Thank you.
Thank you.